Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Today is Coffee with the Crew, and we're going to go over a few different things today. So how we appeal to buyers and sellers. And the first question is going to be, during a listing consultation, we go over things to get a home ready to sell. What are some of those things, John?
So every house is different, but kind of some of the basics. So the list can be extensive, but kind of some of the basics are to number one, declutter. So you want to help the house look and feel as big as possible, not too busy. So taking away some of those personal touches on a house, family pictures, things that are going to be distracting when people are viewing the house. I think that's one important thing. The second thing is cleaning. Even though no matter how clean you are, I think you can always clean windows, maybe that you haven't cleaned on a second floor. Just different kinds of cleaning that maybe we don't normally do, cleaning baseboards, just more detail kind of cleaning. And I mean, again, the list is fairly extensive, so it really depends from house to house. Having your landscaping look nice, having that curb appeal is always going to be important. Your entryway, what you have there, what you don't have there is going to be important so that the house is inviting when you first walk in that house. So again, it's something that we really strive to provide, is walking through your house and kind of helping each individual person with those, or each individual seller with those things, because it's going to be different from house to house.
I think one of the things he touched on that a lot of people miss is standing at the door. So a lot of times we're there longer than we are maybe in other places of the house. So they're looking around while we're trying to get the lockbox open. So I think it's a really good point to have it swept, and then in Pueblo West we get those little spiders that put the cobwebs all over a stucco. So having all that washed down so that while they're standing there waiting for us to get the key out of the box, everything looks really appealing before they walk in. I always tell people kind of what you see in the yard is usually how the inside of the house looks. So if it doesn't look so good on the curb appeal, then you're kind of overcoming that before you even hit the house.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So why do we take time to view a property before doing a market analysis? So basically, what I'm asking is why, there are some agents that go to the house and they just provide a number right away when we actually take the time to view the property, go back and do a market analysis. Jamie?
So the reason I like a two-step listing process, and that's what it's called, is I want to get a feel for the house. I want to see how that floor plan feels, because to me, it can affect the value. The price of the home if something's a little strange, or maybe you have to walk through a bedroom to get to another bedroom. I also like to see the finishes, is this house superior to its competition? And if it is, how am I going to adjust for that? I like to have the seller tell me why they love their home, because most likely that's why their buyer will love the home. So we want to touch on that marketing piece too, of what do you really enjoy about it, whether it's the neighborhood, the views, access to trails, things like that. And really finish. I also like to walk through and stage, if there's things that I think need to be moved in the house where an area feels tight, or maybe too many photos, or bright colors. If we have really bright rooms, sometimes they don't photograph so well. So just seeing if, one, it's an option, maybe repainting. What's the flooring condition? Because condition really makes a difference in price. You have to know what condition the house is in. So I always find it interesting that somebody could come up with a price at a table and not really know what they're looking at yet. I'm sure, if this was tract housing, meaning all the houses are the same, they're just a different floor plan, it may be a little bit easier, but in Pueblo West, we have a lot of different builders and a lot of different floor plans. So it's very hard. Plus, I want to be spot on. I'm not somebody who likes to guess at things. I like knowing what I know. And when I give somebody a number, I can stand behind the number because I have proof. So when I come back and do the market analysis, I'm like, here's our competition, or here's what's sold, here's our competition, and here's the range I think we should list your house at. And then of course I like doing a net sheet right away because most, or on the second, because most sellers care about their net. So getting the feel for the home and what it looks, what it smells like. A lot of times people have pets they can't smell and everybody else can, or smokers. You know, if they're smoking, it affects value because, well, a lot of people aren't smokers, so they don't want the house to smell like smoke. So that's why I do it. Anybody else want to add to that?
You guys definitely could. So, Ashley, what are simple things or simple items to consider to have a smooth inspection?
So from a selling standpoint, you would want to make sure that they have access to the areas that the inspector plans to inspect. So that would include attic, crawl space, garage. We all have those honeydew projects. So now's the time to get those done because they will more than likely come up in the inspection. So, and it can be something as simple as changing out a light bulb if they're burnout, replacing batteries in all the fire alarms so they're not constantly chirping. And then from a buyer's perspective, you're paying the inspector to inspect the property for you. So I would just simply say, let them do their job. They, work better without buyers or agents hovering over them. So I can't speak for all agents, but we use inspectors that are licensed, insured. They've gone through the background and all of that. So they typically have access to our e-keys. So they can go into the property, start the inspection, which is, a couple hours long. So it can be a little lengthy. And then we usually show up at the tail end of things to go over the report. They'll go over items of concern and then walk the buyer through the property. So we like to have the buyer and us as an agent show up maybe like at the last 20 minutes, so that the inspector can go over those items with us. And that's allowing them time to fully inspect the property from roof to foundation without anybody hovering over them. So
I think too, just to add to that, like preparing the buyer, especially in this marketplace, is, are you really going to ask for cosmetic items? Because the seller has the choice whether to do them or not. And is it worth losing a house in this marketplace to ask for smaller things? I prepare my buyers by saying, we're looking at big ticket items, roofs, furnaces, structural, environmental, like mold, making sure the septic system at the time of septic is clean and inspected. And I know Ashley and I did a deal together, and my seller had a big china cabinet in front of the electrical panel because it was an older house, so it was inside the house, and the inspector had to go back. So it was an inconvenience for the seller and for the buyer, and then for the inspector, and then we had to go back just to look at it. And I tell people too, when they meet there the second time, it's usually the second time the buyer has had their eyes on the house. And they do want to walk through it again and familiarize themselves, because in this marketplace, they're looking at it once and writing an offer.
right.
And that second time is really important for the buyer. Like if they want to measure for window coverings or lay out their furniture. It gives them a little bit of time to do that without inconveniencing the seller to be out of the house again.
Exactly.
I might add just one thing on there because I had a couple inspections actually lately where they couldn't get access to the attic so they could check insulation. Now, when was the last time you crawled up in your attic? It's not something that we usually do, but a lot of times we'll paint and we paint that attic shut. We don't think about it. We're just painting. Well, the inspectors can't do any destruction. They can't tear anything off. They can't, I mean, it'd be simple. Take an X-Acto knife and cut the paint, but they're not allowed to do that because that's a little bit of destruction. So just make sure they have access. You don't have things piled up and that the attic actually opens up. So they don't have to come back and they can finish what they need to do.
Yeah, that's a good point too for appraisal, because if it's an FHA or VA, the appraiser has to take a picture of the attic space. So I have had appraisers too that have canceled because they couldn't get access, whether it was moving boxes in the way or same thing. And really, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but we know in this market, delaying an inspection or a close, like an appraisal, because if we delay the appraiser, then normally we're delaying the closing, could be risky for a buyer. You know, whether their deadline's going to pass or not, whether the seller's going to agree to extend it. So it's a really good way to prep the seller, because really the seller should be cutting that open and letting them know. And a lot of times on new construction, painters paint and then they caulk it.
Mhm.
Probably habit is what I'm thinking. So just getting it, that's a really good point. Jay has nothing on.
No, just with inspection items, you just really got the expectation. Like you said, the market's super hot. So for buyers, really cosmetic stuff is most of the stuff that they can do themselves. You wouldn't really want to kill a deal over a burnout light bulb, or there's, a small hole in the drywall or something like that. You definitely want to look for big ticket. And then on the seller side, the house the best. So if like, one thing that drives me crazy is when they have dripping sinks. Like if you know that the sink drips, that's probably something you want to address ahead of time, because the inspectors are going to notice. So all those small little
When they
things-
show up with the bucket already under there.
Yes. Or they have a leak under the sink that they know about and they just leave the bucket.
I was at an inspection yesterday, and the way the conversation went with the inspector was, in this market, I think the inspection is a honeydew list. It's a to-do list for the most part, other than some big ticket items, is, the carpet's coming up here. So that's on the honeydew list to get done at some point. And I think that's up to the buyer, what order that goes in, based on their preferences and stuff. But I thought that was a good approach to it, is, you want the things that need to function, like the furnace, the roof, structural, etc. But some of those cosmetic things, Jay, like you're talking about, other than dripping water, can kind of be put on that to-do list. That's one thing that drives me nuts too, is dripping water under a sink. So, that's one thing. Make sure you have that before you put the house on the market. Make sure you don't have water leaking under your sinks. So, but I thought the to-do list was kind of a cool approach of, taking the inspection and moving that to what can be done, or what the buyer can do once they own the property.
Right.
Is that something the inspector said to them?
They didn't say it to them. We were just kind of having a conversation. And so that was something that they had mentioned to me, like, hey, these are, there's big ticket items, but we look at everything. And so some of those probably are things that buyers do after. The buyer wasn't there. So no.
Oh, I see. I thought that was really good though for an inspector, because I know our inspectors will say, this is really typical, or it's cosmetic.
Right.
Just preparing the buyer that, because we do this every day, so we're used to seeing a lot of things, and buyers are doing it maybe statistically every 3 to 5 years. So they forget, and we do it all the time. So they hear it and then they're like in panic mode. And I like that our inspectors say this is typical and it's cosmetic. And then I think that helps too.
Right.
Well, and I like to prepare them that the inspector's job is to find everything that is wrong or could possibly go wrong with the house. So really, majority of homes, as long as they're well taken care of, about, I would probably say 90% of it is preventative maintenance. Like things you want to keep in mind going down the road, like making sure that around your windows or around your soffits and stuff are all caulked and sealed, so that way moisture doesn't get in there or bugs or anything like that. Mainly things like that, sealing cracks in concrete, stuff like that. But majority of it usually is just preventative. And I always tell my people, like, it's their job to find everything that's wrong. So it's going to sound like a lot, but really you're just looking for the major things.
Right.
Changing out air filters. Do that. We've seen some gross ones. So one thing that we offer is a buyer consult. Can you speak on that, Jay?
Yeah. So the buyer consult is really to get people prepared for what's going on in the market. With it being so hot, there's a lot of competition. We're in a really strong seller's market. So what that means is there's a really high demand of buyers, but a very low inventory of homes. So I like to get my buyers mentally prepared. And I do this before I show them any houses, because there's a lot of steps that we need to go through to make the process quick and smooth. And properties that are already on the market tend to move really fast. So the buyers need to be prepared and they need to be ready to move on something if they find something that they like. Mainly what it's for is so they get the opportunity to meet me. They can put a face to who they're working with. They actually get to meet me kind of in a neutral environment. And then I also get to meet them and kind of learn a little bit more about their unique situation. But ultimately, it's to get them mentally prepared for what's going on. Because the last thing you want to do is have your buyer get beat up a couple times in this market and then leave you because they feel you're not doing your job, which isn't the truth. There's just that much competition. Most people are getting beat 3, 4, 5 times, and it's nothing that has to do with them. There's just so many people they're competing against. When you have a deal that has 20 offers, 5 of them are cash and the other 10 are conventional, that's a lot of competition, a lot of strong competition. So I just like to tell people, the good news is we only have to be lucky once. So don't get too up, don't get the first couple, because the right one's always coming down the pipe. And the crazy thing about real estate, it always seems to work out how it's supposed to, and it usually works out for the better for the person. So whether that's waiting or it wasn't that house, even though you loved it, some better's always coming down the pipe for you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it important to have an agent who's familiar with the local market? Cindy?
So as Jay said, this is a seller's market. Things are moving extremely fast. Sometimes homes are on the market, not for days and weeks anymore, but for hours. So it's important that your agent has their thumb on the market. They know what's coming up. They know what's falling, what's come back, if there's a second chance for you, and they're sending you that information. It's also important that they have good communication with you so that you're talking back and forth. I had a property yesterday, came on the market over the weekend, but there was no scheduling until Monday. We got in right on Monday, 9 o'clock, we're putting in an offer, and the sellers got an above cash offer. They said, no more offers, no more showings right away. So this market, like Jay said, it's not that you don't have a good offer, you don't have a good contract. It's a brutal market, brutal. And so your agent really has to know what's going on. They need to be local. They need to know the inventory. They need to know the people they're working with to help you out. It's crucial. It's very crucial right now if you're wanting to get into a house.
I think that's a really good point, Cindy, because we are strong listers. We have a lot of listings. And I know agents and buyers they want to get in and see it. And sometimes we get all cash offers And the seller has the right to take a contract anytime they want to, even if you've called for a highest and best offer, let's say at noon on another day. If the seller finds an offer that they want, they can take it. There's no waiting. And I think when you say knowing the market, that's like we always talk market statistics, right? So we look at how many are going FHA, how many are going VA, what's the highest, like what's the sweet spot in Pueblo West, and are if that's where everybody's buying, then we know we have more competition in that number, and in that local knowledge of, you know, one street's Aberdeen, the other street Central, and what that does to a value is
Right.
really critical on knowing what's happening. I mean, I've had out of town agents sell houses that they didn't tell the buyer they had a septic system.
Yeah.
So septics are totally different than a sewer system, and they have to be treated and cleaned and inspected. And I've had people say, no, I'm on city sewer. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're on a septic system. And how long have you been here? And we need to have that looked at. And there, you know, we kind of, because we're here, we know the borders of where that's setting up and to prepare people, because a lot of people coming from big cities, they don't want to be on a septic. They're afraid of it. So they want to be on a sewer. You don't want to get them in love with a house that now has a septic system, or get them into a house and they don't realize the maintenance that they have to do on their septic. So it's a real big thing about knowledge. And obviously you don't want a seller to be upset either that they terminate the contract because they thought they were on sewer and they're on septic. And like I had an offer over the weekend on one of our properties, and the agent kept calling me, and I said, well, do you have a pre-qual? Because I don't have a pre-qual yet. Like, to me, it's not an offer until I know they can buy. And he's like, oh, the lender's working on it. And I'm like, I'm not taking my seller's house off the market for somebody I don't know that can truly buy. And I said, can you just ask them to get it to us right away? So I let the seller know we had an offer, but we don't know if they're really a qualified buyer or not. So it would be risky to take their house off the market for a hopeful, I guess.
Right.
And they agreed. The seller wants to make sure, and it was sight unseen. That's another big thing we get, which is makes me nervous as a listing agent, and I'm sure it doesn't make buyers agents excited either, because it's a risky deal. Like, they haven't seen the house, so they're just going off of pictures, and we know that pictures are great, but again, they don't show us the floor plan. You know, you can't tell if there's an odor, or there's things like that you know, that you need to consider. And even the agent didn't walk through it. So I have concerns, like, at least with us, we walk through it. We asked if we could FaceTime or take a video or that kind of thing, so that we have our eyes on it for our client. But this agent was from out of town, a couple of hours away, and just they've never even driven the neighborhood. So, you know, it's a crazy market. And I think, you know, if you didn't have experienced agent, they would take it because it was over full price. And they would have just taken the deal, which it may not work out just because you don't know if they're qualified and they've never seen the property. So
Yeah.
I think that's important.
Well, and I like too that Cindy, she mentioned the relationships with other agents. So I think that's really big in this market, especially for buyers, because like I said, when there's that much competition and everything that goes on to the MLS, pretty much public to all the agents, if you have somebody who has specifically what you're looking for and it's advantageous for their seller to get it sold and it's advantageous for your buyer to buy it, I really think those relationships go a long way, because that's part of it. A lot of buyers ask too, like, well, what else do you do aside from just sending me stuff in the MLS? Well, with those relationships with the other local agents, you know, we're constantly hunting. We're using those relationships to try to find you a property. So I think that was very important. Very, very good. She touched on it.
Yeah, I think that's important. Like I had a deal that the agent from out of town sent a notice to terminate, never called, explained why, I never heard from the agent. And I think here locally, like we have a relationship. If we're going to terminate, we're going to call the agent and say, here's why we're terminating. Is there anything we can do to save the deal? And we have those relationships where we can work on that and potentially try to save, one side or I mean, both sides, but from our side, we can try to save that deal because we do have those relationships. You can have those conversations with people that you've dealt with in the past where sometimes with out of town agents, you've never met them. In this case, I never even actually had a conversation with the guy. He emailed me a couple times and then just sent a notice to terminate, and that was it. There was no other open line of communication. So that communication, I think, is huge. And those connections, Jay and Cindy, like those are big. Being able to call someone, knowing them personally and knowing how to negotiate with them and how they operate and how they work. I think that's huge.
I think you're absolutely right. And that really helps our sellers too, all the connections that we have, because we have a saying around our office that if you need something, we've got a guy. So I think those are key. So your local realtors really have those connections that you need if you need to get something done, whether it's a roof repair or plumbing or whatever. And then I just wanted to touch on one other thing about a local realtor. There are things in our area that people from out of our area don't really understand, such as we have an EPA site. So what does that really mean to you? We have places that have wells and some have taps. That's very important to people. So you need to know those areas, how to transfer a well. So there are certain things in our area that are specialty that aren't in other areas. So our local realtors know how to handle that situation, which really takes away the headaches from both our sellers and our buyers. So that's important. I know I have a property now which has some wells on it. So I did a little bit of research for them, but I knew how to handle it. So that's key. I think that really helps them out, protects our buyers and sellers.
Due diligence. It's what I always say. I don't sell out of Pueblo because I never lived out of Pueblo. Could I? Absolutely. Can I do enough due diligence for my client to be able to purchase? Yes. But it takes a long time. It takes time to make sure that your buyer is purchasing what they want and that there's no other, like down here, our title companies don't transfer utilities. Well, in other areas, they only have one utility and they transfer it all at closing. So every place works a little bit different. It really, local knowledge helps. Like I would never buy a house in Florida thinking I knew what was going on in Florida, because I don't. And I want to make sure that somebody lives there and that if I need them after the sale, that they're going to call me back. So,
yeah,
Well,
it was, oh, sorry.
No, you're good. I was just going to say, ultimately, our goal is to provide people with the best service possible. And I think that knowledge and making the transaction as seamless as it could be, I really think that's the biggest deal. And that's why we talk about it quite a bit. But ultimately, that's the goal, is to avoid those hiccups. So that way the seller walks away happy, the buyer walks away happy. It's a win-win or no deal. If you can overcome the objection before they even have one, it saves people from getting emotional or getting upset and just makes the deal all that much smoother. So.
Go ahead, Ashley. You had something.
Okay. Yeah. So I had some out of town clients that were referred to me, and we went and showed property yesterday morning, and they're coming from Mississippi. And so she's starting a job here Monday. And so it was nice because I set up the properties, but I allowed time in between to kind of take them around Pueblo. And so we went downtown and was able to speak about restaurants, local ones that are really good, and, just kind of get them a feel for the neighborhood and surrounding areas, because it's going to be their home. And so it was just nice to be able to do that. And those who are not local wouldn't really know those things. So it was, and they commented on how they appreciated that. And so it's just nice to allow, or to have your buyers, they're confident that you know the area and you know what you're selling. So.
Well, thank you everyone for meeting with us today. That was a really good point, Ashley. I love the river walk, so I hope you showed them that. It's
did.
great.
Yes.
Yeah. And the reservoir. I mean, Pueblo does offer a lot of great things, so we definitely need to highlight them and support local. So again, thank you everyone for meeting with us, and we hope that you enjoyed this Coffee with the Crew talk today, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.